Alrighty guys, we're going to start rigging Rudy here. This model was provided to us by one of the other professors at DMAC, Alex Duque, and I'm going to be going through a couple of different lessons to set him up. We will be starting with the legs, but I do want to mention one thing before we start, and that's the scale of this character. Most people are used to modeling to scale, but in case you are not, if you go under your settings and preferences, you will find under settings there's a default linear unit in Maya. Now, I have mine set to feet. The default is actually centimeters. And you'll notice if I change that, you can see how much taller or larger it is actually than the grid itself. That grid right now is about 20 centimeters by 20 centimeters. So, actually probably more than that now that I think about it. But he is actually set to feet, and you do want to use work in proper units for a couple of different reasons. Dynamics being one. Granted, he doesn't have anything necessarily that will be dynamic, but we're going to need it eventually. So without further ado, let me just show you one more thing. If I go to his front view right now, you'll notice that he is just over 6 units high. So he's about 6'1", 6'2", which is appropriate if you are used to seeing the original pictures of Mr. Rudy here. He is a pretty tall guy in comparison to some of the other models that are found on our on 3DSK. So to start with him, basically I'm going to start doing the legs. I like to work from the ground up in terms of when I do rigging, so I'm going to go ahead and start with the legs. There's a couple things that I will need on, for instance the X-ray joints, which is found right here, and I'm also going to turn on wireframe on shaded, and I'm just going to kind of look at his wireframe first just to get an idea of where I'm going to be placing the joints, because I know he's got a decent area right here for where his hips are going to be. If you think about the anatomy, you'll have the pelvis, you'll have the fibula and the tibia. So we're going to be placing these kind of based off of the actual human anatomy, but there are some areas where we're going to have to change it up just a bit to make sure that things will work correctly, because we're not really doing the exact human anatomy. If we did that, we would have far more joints placed than we're actually going to have, especially in places like the feet or the hands. So we're going to keep it very simple. Again, this is basically where his hip would pivot from kind of the base of his spine. So we're looking really for where the hip and the leg meet, and that's about right here. It's a little more towards the outside, obviously, because your hip makes up most of this area right here. So I'm going to be kind of eyeballing this just to see which edge loop I want to look at. So this is the edge loop I'm looking at here, and if I check this out in the side view, we can see where it is. So I kind of can get an idea of where I'm going to start in terms of where to place my joints. I'm thinking for the initial joint on the leg, I'm thinking at this little intersection right here. And that should provide us with a good enough range of motion. I might even think of putting it one step back, but I feel like I'd be going a little too far back there. And it's all, I could go a little bit, maybe right about here actually. I don't have to go exactly on the intersection of an edge loop, but I tend to do that. It makes things a little bit easier sometimes, but if you're close enough, you should be fine. And then I'll be moving on from there, but I'll explain it as I go along. So without further ado, again, make sure X-ray joints is on. That'll allow you to see the joints through the skin, which is really, really, really useful. So I'm going to grab my joint tool, and I don't know what the scale is going to look like in terms of the joint size, but we'll find out in a second. So based on that first point, I'm going to place it right about right here. You can see we can't see a thing in terms of the joint right now, but that's because it is extremely small. That is microscopic, so I'm just going to hit backspace and delete that. I'm going to show you the settings on how to change the display size of your joints. You go to the display menu, animation, joint size. That's where you'll find it. And as you can see, mine is set pretty low from something I was doing recently, most likely. So I'll just keep testing it. That's a little bit better, and these will change as per the settings in the joints tool. There's this these scaling tools right here that will are associated with the scale compensate here. It'll basically scale the radius of the joints as you're drawing them. So there is something to that. You'll kind of see it as I'm drawing the joints. Some of them will be larger and some of them will be smaller, but it's easily editable. There's an attribute on every joint that called radius that you can adjust. So without further ado, I think now I should be okay. That's a lot better. It's still not you know, perfect, but we'll live. So I already clicked and placed the joint, and I'm not particularly happy with where it went exactly. So what I can do is just grab my middle mouse button. That's generally the one with the wheel. For regular mice users, those of you using Macintoshes may have a little bit of difficulty using it if you're using the Macintosh mouse, that is. I'm not quite sure how to do a middle click on that. But you can middle click around just to position it. I wouldn't recommend doing that a lot because it doesn't reorient joints, and you'll see that in just a second. You can actually see right now the joint's orientation matches the world space orientation down here. So because of that, once I start drawing the next joint in, it's actually going to automatically orient that joint, this first joint, towards the next one. If you watch, it may not be very visible here, but I'll zoom in again. So now you can see the joints are scaling based on, it's mostly based on the distance between the two joints. And that's how it kind of decides how big to make them. So sometimes they'll come out okay, some of them maybe not so much. Now you can see, once I let go of this, watch that first joint up there. It's not horribly visible, but you can see the axis of the joint is now aiming towards the child joint, which became the knee ultimately. So we're going to see that a lot. The joints do orient to the child joint that you create. If there is no child joint, it'll just match the world space axes, which is that little compass down there. So as for the knee, I'm thinking about where does your knee actually pivot from? It is up front where your patella is. Granted, the patella is a floating bone, but this is where your knee pivots from. So that's something to keep in mind. You don't want to put the knee joint back here. It just would not look proper in the end. So from there, I'm going to go to his ankle. Now he has a pretty obvious area of where the ankle would start at. It's right in here in this little ball section. And what I'm looking at, I'm looking for multiple edge loops really, and he's got quite a few in the back here. So what I'm thinking is right about here should work just fine for positioning. And again, if I go back up to the knee, you can now see that it is adjusted its own axis. Again, it may be a little difficult to see depending on how the quality of this video comes out in the end, but you'll see it as you're drawing them in. After the ankle, I'm going to go to the ball of his foot, which is just after the toes. If you stand on the ball of your feet, you'll notice it. If you've ever seen a woman's foot in high heels, that's the ball of their foot. The angle at which that's going is pretty evident where the ball is going. So I'm going to follow this edge loop right here, and I'm actually going to go to the bottom of his foot because I want to make sure that his foot is planted on the ground. So I'm going to go right here, and again, you'll notice the scale of the joint changes a little bit. That's fine. Now I could go right down to the axis line for this, but where I'm at, I'm millimeters above the floor here, so that's fine. And last but not least, I'm going to create one more joint right here. I'm going to hold down Shift for this too. This will kind of align it so that it stays in a straight line, just like in Photoshop. So I'm going to create that one last joint, and that will, again, align the previous joint in that direction. And this will be used to wiggle the toes later on. So with that, I'm going to hit Enter. And if I show you the orientations now, you'll notice that definitely does not follow the world space axis. You'll notice that the X is pointing at the next joint, and the Z and Y kind of point out in different directions. This will happen pretty often. I will be editing this in just a second, but first, as you can see, it is not placed inside of his leg, so I need to reposition these joints. Now, all I'm going to do is take it and move it over in the Z. I'm going to try and place it as centralized as possible, and that looks pretty good. I could go a little further outside, but I think that's okay. Right there, and it's not perfectly centered in the knee, but that's okay. This should work just fine. You could make a case to actually create, where it's kinked a little bit, but I've never found it to be 100% necessary. His legs are pretty straight, so this should work just fine. So, having said that, I'm going to rename my joints real quick. My naming conventions are a little unique. I think everybody that does rigging has their own special naming conventions. So you don't have to be as specific, but you should name your joints so that you know what they are. For example, I always put prefixes on my joints to let me know kind of what they are. So in this case, this is a joint, yes, but I like to put BNJNT. That stands for bind joint. This means that this joint will actually be bound to the skin later on. Now that's many lessons from now, but it's a good thing to know because there are going to be cases where you'll have multiple joint sets, some of which don't actually influence the skin. We're actually going to see one in just a few seconds. So this is going to be BN joint, and I don't like to call this hip, even though it is placed in that area. There is going to be a separate joint for the hip, for kind of rotating the hip a little bit extra on top of what you'll be able to do with the rest of the rig. So this is BN joint underscore, and I generally call this up leg, and I will put an 01 after that. I generally put 01 after everything. It's just something I picked up a while ago, and I just continued to do it. So it's not really necessary, but I just do it. Okay. So next up, BNJNT knee, and then BNJNT ankle. I'm not getting my underscores right today. BNJNT ball 01 and BNJNT toe 01. Now I'm noticing that I've already forgotten to do something which is pretty common because I am human, and that's basically to define this as the left side. So I can I can show you another tool really quick that's really awesome in its simplicity. I'm just going to grab the top joint in that hierarchy there, which is the up leg. I'm going to go to modify, and I already made another mistake too. I'm on a roll today. It's just renaming something, but I'll show it to you in a second. So I'm just going to use search and replace names, and this will allow me to just search for one item and replace with another. This is common in a lot of different programs out there. So I'm going to search for, in this case, I think I can just do underscore, and I'm going to replace it with underscore L underscore. So basically it'll take any underscore that's in this hierarchy, because it's set to hierarchy, and it's going to replace it with an underscore L underscore. So hit that, and you can see everything in there is now the left side. Okay, just to define it, because obviously we're going to have a left and right. Now the other thing that I said I made a mistake on is this last one, the toe joint. I'm actually not going to call it a BN joint. It's not a bind joint. This joint actually does not influence the skin in any way, shape, or form. It's kind of there for something that we're going to do in a minute that I'll explain, but it will not actually influence the skin directly. Everything else will. So I call this a BE joint. Again, I picked this up from just watching a tutorial, and I kind of liked it. So it stands for bone end. It's basically the end of a chain. So just going to rename that, and again, this really doesn't help us at the current time, but it will help us way down the line. Trust me. So having done that, I can now go in and I need to adjust the orientations for all of this. Now, I'm going to turn off wireframe unshaded and turn on regular X-ray, because I know for a fact that these are going to be difficult to see if I don't do that. So what I want to do is go into component mode so that I can adjust these orientations. It's quite easy to do, really. All you have to do, you can hit F8 or hit this button up here on your toolbars. So F8, and then you can hit the question mark over here, because joints, unlike polygons and NURBS, they don't have, you know, vertices or anything. They're really their only component, or their main component, is their orientation. So if you turn on the question mark, that will allow you to see it. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the question mark, and now I can directly select the local rotation axis of the joint. And there's a good reason to adjust these. Basically, I find that the best way to do this is where each individual chain of the body matches itself. So the left leg will match itself, the right leg will match itself, the left arm, the right arm, the spine. All these little sections will match themselves. So all the bones in that chain will match. There are some minor caveats to this, like you'll get the clavicle or the hip. They're kind of on their own. They're just a joint all in its own little chain. So we'll get to those eventually, but for now I'm just going to edit these. And the way I do it, you just, again, select the orientation, and now I need to use my rotate tool, and I'm going to use something called discrete rotate. Now if you double click the rotate tool, you'll find a section right here. It says discrete rotate. And when you turn that on, it turns on the step size. Basically what this is just snap rotate. Now I don't need to actually turn it on, thankfully. Maya has a little hotkey to temporarily turn it on. Actually, I'll show you that. Let me bring it back up. Now if I hold down the J key, as you can see, it turns it on while I'm holding it down. Okay? So that helps. You can go in here and change the step size if you want. I'm fine with 15. That works for me. Basically, that means while I'm holding down J, it will only rotate in 15-degree increments. So, I hold down J, and I'm going to start rotating this. My ultimate goal here is to make it look like this. X will always point down towards the next joint, and Z will point out the left side of the leg. This is just the method that I prefer. Frankly, it would work on the other side as well. But that's just the method that I prefer to use. I seem to get better results out of that. So that's what I'm going to do, and you'll find that you don't have to adjust everything. Look at the knee. X is pointing down, Z is pointing out the left side. Y inherently points in the other direction. That's just, if you move two of them, that's the way it's going to go. So you won't have to adjust everything. It's kind of on a hit or miss basis. You'll find that sometimes you might only have to edit one. So again, hold down J, just rotate around it and give it an extra look. Okay, and I over-rotated on that one, so I can go back in and readjust. Excuse me. So one more. And I'm going to rotate around, and I can see that I did it once more. And that should be it. So X is pretty much the aim joint, or the aim direction for every one of these. And Z is pointing at the left side. So I can exit component mode. Again, you can hit this button or hit F8 again, and everything is good to go. We can now start adding everything else to this that's going to make it work. Now, normally I'd probably do another tutorial for this, but I'm just going to keep going. I could kind of do this really fast if I wanted to, but I'm not going to. So I'm going to turn off X-ray, turn back on my wireframe. I really don't think I need that right now, but it's okay. It won't get in the way too much. I have a feeling I'm also going to need to adjust something else in a second, but we'll find out. Now, the next thing I need to do is create 3 IK handles. Basically, IK handles allow your leg to move in a manner much like your leg would. It will bend at the knee. It's going to allow us to do a couple extra things, too. So, first things first, as of, I think, Maya 2010, the default setting for the IK handle is not the one we particularly want. So I'm just going to double-click the IK handle button. It's right here. And I'm going to change the current solver to IKRP. This allows us to create what's called a pole vector, which will be kind of the last step that we do, but you'll see it in a little while. So again, make sure it's set to RP. It's just going to help us out. And I'm going to create 3 IK handles. Basically, you just click on one joint, click on the next joint. So I'm going to start by clicking on the upper leg, and then clicking on the ankle. And if I move this IK, you'll notice this allows us to move the leg, just how a leg would move. Now I'm noticing that the IK handle size is also really small, so I'm going to have to adjust that. That's found in the same spot. Display, animation, IK handle size, and let's see. There it is. It's just starting to show up now. Okay, that should be good. Alright, now I need 2 more IK handles, so I'm going to grab the tool again by hitting Y, and then I'm going to create one from the ankle to the ball, and one more, just hit Y, from the ball to the toe. So I get 3 different IK handles. You'll notice also in the hierarchy that these little effector things got created. Leave them alone. Okay? So I'm just going to rename my IK handles. The one that went from the upper leg to the ankle, I'm going to call that IK ankle 01. Actually, I'm going to be smart this time. IKL ankle 01. Next up will be, if I could double click, IKL ball 01. One thing, if you're using the outliner to rename stuff, this is kind of neat. If you just put a space in there, Maya hates spaces, so it's going to automatically replace it with an underscore. That saves you a tiny, tiny bit of time, but it's useful to know. I found that one out by accident. Okay, so we got ankle, ball, and toe. All 3 of these are really the reason that this foot setup is going to work. So, The next step is I need to create a little null hierarchy, and a null is basically just an empty group. If you're there for class, you'll have heard my 5-minute speech about nulls and transform nodes and all this other stuff. So, how do we create a null? Make sure nothing is selected and hit Control G. That creates an empty group, which is completely invisible. So what I want to do is I'm going to use these to kind of create a little hierarchy of positions to rotate from, and that will make everything work in the long run. So I'm going to use this little technique I call the DV snap. That's DV Delta Victor. Just hold down those two keys on your keyboard, D and V, and use your middle mouse button, and just go over the ball joint and just move your mouse a little bit after clicking with that middle mouse button, and that will snap it. I call this the DV snap. It's a really simple thing, but I found that giving it a name just helps people remember it. And again, just snap it to the ball joint, and what you're going to do then is duplicate that twice. Alright, and we're going to create two more. I'm going to duplicate that one more time, and DV snap it to the toe joint. Okay? So again, we just have a couple of nulls, 3 of which are on the ball of the foot, 1 of which is on the toe. And then one more, I'm going to duplicate that toe null, and I'll hold down DV, but I'm not going to middle mouse button on anything. I'm actually going to grab the blue handle, which is going to be a little difficult to see here, but that blue handle, the Z direction handle. I'll zoom out a little bit. DV, grab the blue handle, and I'm going to snap it to basically the back of his foot. I just want to move it in Z. So right about there. This is going to be a position to kind of rotate from the back of the foot. I call it the heel lift. And we'll be naming these in just a second, coincidentally. So now that we have those 5, we can go ahead and name these, and hopefully I can get all the names right. So this will be, you can call this group, null, whatever you want. I tend to call it GRP, L, and there's 3 that are going to be on the ball joint. One is going to be called ball rotate, 01. The next one will be, and again, make sure you put in the L. This will be ball lift, 01. And the last one will be toe wiggle, 01. Those are the 3 that are on top of the ball joint. Alright, this 4th one, which is on the toe joint, will be toe lift, 01. And the one that's on the back of the foot will be heel lift, 01. Alrighty, so now, with that being done, we have to create a little group hierarchy here of all of these things. And if you don't do this in a very specific order, it's not going to work. So, I'll do this at a normal speed. You guys can back up and do it again. And that's the best part about having this video. So, what I want to do is take toe wiggle and ball lift. I'm kind of going to build this up from the bottom up. That way it's a little bit easier to do. So I take ball lift and toe wiggle. I'm going to put both of those into ball rotate by parenting them. You can middle click drag them in the outliner, which is probably the best bet, or you can use P, which will parent them. But however you want to do it, I just need to make sure that ball lift and toe wiggle both get parented underneath ball rotate. Alright? Now I'm going to take ball rotate and parent that under toe lift. So ball rotate is the child, toe lift is the parent. Middle click drag it. Last but not least, I'm going to take toe lift and parent it underneath heel lift. So that is our little group hierarchy that gets formed. Heel lift is the first level, toe lift is the next, ball rotate is the 3rd level, and then underneath ball rotate you have ball lift and toe wiggle. In that little hierarchy there, we want to put these IKs. So I'm going to take both ankle and ball IK. The 2 of them are going to get parented into ball lift group. So again, I just middle click drag them both, and there they go. And last but not least, I take the toe IK and parent that into toe wiggle group. And this little group setup right here will actually allow us now. We can do it from here, but we're going to set up a foot control for this. So if you notice now, I'll take heel lift. I can rotate that in the X direction. and it rotates from the heel. Toe lift, and rotate in X, it rotates from the toe. Ball rotate is along the Y-axis, and that's kind of like squishing a bug. Ball lift will just bring the foot up on the ball, and toe wiggle will wiggle the toes, as you expected. So now we just need to set up a little controller for this. Now, in class, I generally just use a NURB circle. So I'll create that, and I'm just going to manipulate the CVs to kind of mimic the shape of a foot. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, especially because I'm in a video. In fact, I'm just going to pause it and then bring it back again once I'm done creating it. Alright, so here is my little foot control. Now, one other thing I want to do real quick is just adjust the pivot of this, and that again is using the DV snap. So I'm hold down DV and snap the pivot of that to the ankle. This will allow us later on to rotate everything in the foot from the ankle, as it should. So, now I have it positioned, I have the pivot set, all that's good. Anytime I create a controller like this, I'm going to go ahead and freeze transformations. I have a hotkey for it, so if I do it, you may not see me go up to the menu, you may just hear me say freeze transformations. Get used to that. I use this hotkey all the time. So freeze transformations and delete history. Again, there is a hotkey for that. I'll do this one time. From henceforth, I'm going to go ahead and just use my hotkey for it because they're right next to each other. So, it's all clean, no history, no transformations, and, excuse me, I'm going to rename this CC, which stands for Control Curve, L Foot Control. Okay, and everything looks good. And basically from here, I just need to add some attributes to this. So again, with it selected, I'm going to go to my channel box to do this. I'll just go to Edit, Add Attribute. And I'm going to create a total of 6, one of which will just be what I call a buffer attribute. It just kind of creates a divider between the translates, rotate, scales, and my custom attributes. So I'll call this Foot Controls, and I'm just going to click on Displayable. The difference between keyable and displayable is displayable will just make a locked attribute. So if I hit Add, there it is. So again, it's just a divider. It does nothing other than that. It's aesthetics. Now, I'm going to create 5 more attributes, and I'm actually going to do them in the same order that our little hierarchy is for these groups. So, I'm going to create heel lift. I'm going to leave it as keyable, float, leave everything just the way it is. And I'm going to hit Add. After heel lift is toe lift. Again, I'm just going to leave everything the way it is. Ball rotate, add, ball lift, add, and toe wiggle, add. And of course, I did something wrong. Let me undo real quick. If you notice, I have the wrong object selected. I have the toe wiggle group. So I need to go back and go to my foot control, which is right here. And I'm going to do that again. So that's why Control Z is my favorite hotkey. Heel, lift, toe lift. See that it pays to check out your windows and see that it says CCL foot control. Ball, rotate, ball, lift, and toe wiggle. Alright, so now they're all good. You can see that little buffer attribute there is just kind of divided it. That was all it was for. Alright, so now all I got to do is connect these attributes to these groups. And basically what I'm going to do is just connect it to their rotations so that as I adjust these, it will automatically rotate. This is fairly simple, but if you've never used the connection editor, it can be a little hard to understand. So what I'm going to do first is just select my foot control and go into the connection editor, which you'll find under Window, Connection Editor. Alright, now if yours shows a lot more stuff, it'll be because under Left Display, I have Show Non-Keyable off. If I turn it back on, you'll see it shows a lot of stuff. I don't need any of that for now. There will be other situations where you might need that, but for now, I'm just turning off non-keyable. My right side will also not show that. It just cleans this up a lot. And you can see there's all of our custom attributes that we made. which is great. And the other thing is it actually hides that foot controls one because it's not a keyable attribute. So again, makes it a lot better. Now the foot control is going to stay on the left side of this window the entire time. We're going to be loading stuff onto the right, and in this case it's going to be these groups that we made. So we're going to do one connection per group, and it's going to be based on this order. So heel lift is the first one up, so I will grab my heel lift group and hit reload right. So now you can see our heel lift group is on the right, our foot control is on the left. If you ever have a lot more to, visible up there, you can check down at the bottom and you'll see their names. Really, trust me, just take a double look before you start clicking on anything. To connect something, though, it's really simple. Basically, I want to connect the heel lift attribute to the rotate X of the heel lift group. If you saw me rotating earlier, you'll notice that I rotated on X. That's the only one that's going to rotate based on the attributes we created. So I click on heel lift on the left, rotate X on the right, and you'll notice on the heel lift group, rotate X turned yellow, meaning there is now a connection. So I just have to do that for every group. So now I'll load in the next group on the right. That's toe lift, reload right, and there it is. On the left side, since we're dealing with toe lift now, I'm going to select the toe lift attribute, and on the right, I select rotate X. All of them will be rotate X except for ball rotate. That is the only one that works off a different axis. So I'll grab ball rotate, reload right. Hit the ball rotate attribute on the foot control and connect that to rotate Y. This again is the one that's kind of like squishing a bug. So next up, we got ball lift. Select the ball lift attribute on the left and rotate X again on the right. And last but not least is toe wiggle. I'll load that on the right. Click on the toe wiggle attribute from the foot control on the left and select rotate X on the right. So now, if everything's gone correctly, if you go to your foot control again and use these attributes, you'll find that you can now scrub through them using your middle mouse button, and it works. Now some of these shouldn't obviously be used in both directions, and that's something where you can set up minimum and maximum on your attributes, which is a fantastic thing. But for now, for the purposes of this video, we're fine. It works, and that's great. If it doesn't, rewind and just rewatch it again. Trust me, this stuff can easily be learnt through practice. The more you do it, the better you're going to get at it, and the quicker you're going to get it. I'm already at 32 minutes roughly on this video. This setup would only take me about 2 minutes, if that, to do at full speed. So, and granted, I've done a lot of these setups before. So there is a big difference. Now there's one more thing that I need to set up, and that's called a pole vector. And that was something that harkens back to something I mentioned way earlier, and that was from the IK handle. You remember that whole IKRP solver? Well, the reason we did that is for this very step. So what I'm going to do first is I'm just going to create a locator. And you can do that from your animation shelf or create locator. And there it is. It's just a giant 3-axis thing. I don't know what else to call it other than a locator. And what I'm going to do is just move this right onto the knee joint. I'm snapping it to it by holding down V. And now I'm going to go into the side view here and move this forward just in one direction, okay? You want to snap it to the knee first and then move it forward, because this is kind of an aim for the kneecap, and it prevents the knee from breaking if you move it too far in one direction. So the further I have it out, for example, if I do this, you can see how the knee, even at its extreme, is still behind that locator. That's really important to this. So as long as that locator's in front of it, we're good. Alright, I'm happy with the location of it, but the size of that locator is huge. Normally I wouldn't even use a locator, I'd use a curve that I made. So if you want to adjust this locator, you can just use these local scales that are on it. If you scale it using the regular thing, you're going to freeze transformation, it's going to pop right back. So I'm just going to shrink this down to, let's try 0.005. And that actually worked really well. So that's good. So now I'm going to freeze transformation. Again, I'm using my hotkey. So freeze transformation, there's no history on it, but I go ahead and do it just for my OCD purposes. and I'm going to rename this cc underscore L underscore leg PV01. PV, of course, stands for pole vector. Now, we need to make this work. And the way you do that is by selecting the locator and then selecting the ankle IK. You can grab it using the outliner, or if you can see it, it's this little line sticking out of the ankle right there. But regardless of how you do it, you have to pick it in this order. The controller, whatever it may be, whether it's a locator, a triangle, whatever you made, and then the ankle IK. And we're going to go to our animation menu set. Under the constrain menu, we're going to choose pole vector. Now, if you get an error, that means that you didn't have an IKRP solver. That's bad. You can't make a pole vector without an IKRP. So now you'll notice that as I move this, you can see that the knee is aiming toward it, which is great. That's exactly what I was going for. So now that that's done, we just have to clean up our hierarchy out here. What I'm going to do is just collapse the whole group hierarchy thing that we made. And I'm going to take that and parent it under the foot control. So I can just middle click drag it. For those of you that know how to just hit P, you select the child, which is the groups, and then select the foot control and hit P. And that will parent it under the foot control. I'm also going to take the pole vector control, which is the locator, and also parent that under the foot control. So since this is a child, I'll select the pole vector, select the foot control, and hit P. And now, you'll see that as I rotate or move this, you can see that the leg pretty much stays nice and unbroken. Now if I go backward and up, you can see that the leg starts to break. Well, that's what the pole vector's for. I can take this now and move it down again, and you can see that the knee goes back into a proper way. And that's pretty much it. And you'll also notice that because of where we placed the pivot on the foot control, we can also rotate all that, and it looks nice and natural. Okay? So, having done that, our leg is now done. Now there's one other thing, because you got to create the right side as well, and you don't want to have to do everything again. So what you want to do first is we're going to create a hip joint. And basically I'm basing this off of where the hip would rotate from. And from what I'm seeing, I would say it's going to be about right... You know what? I'm not even going to create this in the front view. I'm going to go to a side view and kind of match that right there. I think that's a good position. Well, actually, you know what? It would be a little back here because that's where your spine meets it. Whenever I do spine joints, I don't like to go right along the back. I like to do what I guess like a 70-30 split. So it's like 70% from the front, 30% from the back, something like that. So that's a good position, I think. I'll just create the one joint and hit enter. The reason I went to the side view, by the way, is so that it would be perfectly centered. And of course it didn't even do that. Alright, so I'll just snap it over holding down X, and that's fine. Now this one has world space axes, which is great. That's exactly what I want. And you can change the radius of this if you like, if you want it to be bigger. It's up to you. I'll name this BNJNT, and this will be pelvis, or hip, if you want. And that's it. So now I'm going to take the upper leg joint, and then select the hip joint and hit P. That will automatically create this bone in between. And notice the direction that the bone is pointing in. That means this is the parent and that's the child. Now, having done that, I can actually save myself some time for the right leg. And what I can do is select the upper leg, go to skeleton, mirror joint. I want to mirror across YZ, and I get different results sometimes by using behavior and orientation, but I'll try them both real quick and see which works. But I want to use the search and replace because it'll automatically name them for the right side. So I'll hit apply and check out my orientations. That's not what I want. You can see the X is pointing in the wrong direction. So I'll undo, switch it to orientation, and there we go. I'm looking for basically the same orientations as the left side. X is aiming to the next joint, and Z is pointing out the left side of the body. and we can see that we've gotten that all the way across. Now, as an added benefit, it created the 3 IKs for us. So, having done that, we can actually save ourselves some time. We have a good starting point. So all you got to do basically is you can recreate the foot control, your null setup. The easiest way is just to take the existing one and duplicate it and flip it over, or create a new one. But duplicating it and using that little scale X trick, that will save you quite a bit of time. So having done that, you'll basically be done with the legs at that point, and you can move on to the spine. So for the next video, I'll have all that done, and we'll move on to the spine. So until next time.